For 3 days, Amarachi lived in a secret joy she had never known. She would wake before dawn, not with dread as before, but with excitement. The baby mermaid had become her entire world. She named her Miri, which means water in her language. Every spare moment, Amarachi would slip into her room, close the door, and hold the child close. She would sing to her softly, the same lullabies her own mother had sung to her years ago. The baby would coo and gurgle, her tiny webbed fingers reaching for Amarachi's face, and in those moments, Amarachi felt complete. She had fashioned a small basin that she kept filled with fresh river water, and she would bathe Miri gently, marveling at how her silvery tail would shimmer and flick with happiness. The baby seemed to be thriving, growing stronger each day under Amarachi's tender care. "You are mine now," Amarachi would whisper, tears of joy streaming down her face. "My daughter, my precious gift." But on the 4th morning, everything changed. Amarachi woke to absolute silence. Not the peaceful silence of early morning, but a dead, suffocating silence that pressed against her ears like heavy hands. She rushed outside and gasped. The entire compound had gathered at the gate, staring toward the east with expressions of horror and disbelief. Chinedu stood at the front, his face pale. "What's happening?" Amarachi asked, pushing through the crowd. No one answered. They simply pointed. Amarachi looked toward the river, and her blood turned to ice. The river was gone, completely gone. Where yesterday there had been flowing water, today there was only dry, cracked earth. The riverbed stretched out like an open wound, revealing rocks, dead fish, and the skeletal remains of things that should have stayed hidden forever. "This is impossible," one of the elders whispered, his voice shaking. "The river has flowed for 1,000 years. How can it just disappear?" The village erupted into chaos. Women wailed, children cried, men stood frozen, understanding that without the river, Umora was doomed. The river was their life, their crops depended on it, their drinking water came from it, their very survival was tied to its flow. But Amarachi barely heard the panic around her. Her mind was racing. She thought of the baby in her room, the child from the water. Could this be connected? No, it couldn't be. It was just a baby, just a helpless infant who needed love. That night, as the village fell into restless sleep, Amarachi was awakened by a sound that made her soul tremble. "Return, my child! Return, my child!" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was beautiful and terrible, filled with such raw grief that Amarachi felt tears spring to her eyes even before she fully understood what she was hearing. She sat up, her whole body shaking. The voice came again, louder this time, echoing through the night like thunder. "Return, my child! Return what you have stolen!" Amarachi's hands flew to her mouth. The baby stirred in her basket, whimpering softly. Amarachi crawled to her quickly, gathering the child into her arms. "Shh, shh," she whispered desperately. "It's all right. Mama is here." But it wasn't all right, because suddenly Amarachi knew. She knew with absolute certainty that the river's disappearance, the unnatural silence, the voice in the night, it was all connected to this child who was never meant to be hers. The days that followed were like living in a nightmare. The crops began to wither, the yams rotted in the ground, the palm trees stopped producing fruit. People started getting sick with strange fevers that no medicine could cure. And every night the voice would come, "Return, my child." Amarachi stopped sleeping. She would sit awake all night, holding Miri, rocking her gently while the terrible voice filled the darkness. Sometimes she would see things in the shadows, shapes that moved like water, eyes that glowed like moonlight. She knew it was the River Queen, searching, calling, demanding. But Amarachi couldn't let go. For the first time in 7 years, she felt like a mother. For the first time, she had a purpose beyond her pain. The child needed her, loved her, called her with those tiny sounds that meant mama in the universal language of babies. "I can't," Amarachi would whisper to the darkness. "Please understand, I can't give her back. She's all I have." The baby looked up at her with those ancient eyes and smiled. Just smiled, as if she understood everything and forgave it all. Amarachi made her decision then. She would keep the child hidden. She would die before she gave her up. Let the river rage. Let the village suffer. This child was hers, and nothing, not even death itself, would take her away. But that very night, as Amarachi finally drifted into exhausted sleep, she had a vision. She saw herself standing at the dry riverbed, and there, rising from the cracked earth like mist becoming solid, was a woman. But not just any woman. She was impossibly beautiful, with skin that shimmered like water under moonlight, her hair that flowed like rivers, and her eyes that held the depth of the ocean itself. The River Queen. She looked at Amarachi with such profound sorrow that Amarachi felt her heart break all over again. "You love her," the River Queen said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Amarachi whispered, falling to her knees. "Please don't take her from me. I have nothing else. I am nothing else." The River Queen's expression didn't change. "And what of my nothing?" she asked quietly. "What of my empty arms, my grief? Does a mother's pain only matter when she walks on land?" Amarachi had no answer. The vision faded, but when she woke, her pillow was soaked with tears. The next morning, she knew what she had to do, and the knowing was killing her. The morning of the 8th day, Amarachi woke to screams. She rushed outside to find the entire village in panic. During the night, 3 children had fallen into deep sleeps from which no one could wake them. Their mothers wailed over their still bodies, shaking them, calling their names, but the children lay motionless, barely breathing, as if their spirits had been stolen away. One of them was Nkiru's youngest son. Amarachi stood frozen as she watched Nkiru collapse over her child's body, her screams tearing through the morning air. My baby! Wake up! Please wake up!" Chinedu knelt beside them, his face twisted in anguish. For the first time since bringing home his second wife, Amarachi saw him cry. Real tears, the tears of a father watching his child slip away. The chief's voice boomed across the compound. "Whoever is hiding the river's child, come forward now. Our children are dying. Our land is cursed. Come forward, or by the gods, we will search every home until we find you." Amarachi's legs trembled. She looked around at the grieving mothers, at the dying children, at the withered crops, and the desperate faces of her people. The weight of what she had done crashed down on her like a collapsing wall. She thought of Mmiri, sleeping peacefully in her hidden basket, unaware of the destruction her presence had caused. Sweet, innocent Mmiri, who had given Amarachi a reason to wake up each morning, who had filled the emptiness that had consumed her for 7 long years. But at what cost? How many would suffer for her happiness? How many children would die so she could pretend to be a mother? Amarachi's vision blurred with tears. She turned slowly and walked back to her room, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, she could hear the chief organizing search parties, hear the mothers weeping, hear the village falling apart. Inside her room, she knelt beside the basket and pulled back the cloth. Miri looked up at her and smiled, reaching tiny arms toward her. That smile that had become Amarachi's whole world. "My precious one," Amarachi whispered, her voice breaking. "My sweet, beautiful girl." She picked up the baby and held her close, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feel of her small body against her chest. Tears fell like rain onto the child's shimmering skin. "I thought the gods had finally answered my prayers. I thought you were my miracle, but you were never mine, were you? You were always hers." The baby cooed softly, her webbed fingers touching Amarachi's wet cheek, as if trying to wipe away her tears. Amarachi sat there for a long time, rocking back and forth, singing the lullabies she would never sing again. She memorized everything, the way Miri's tail caught the light, the sound of her breathing, the impossible softness of her skin, the trust in her ancient eyes. Finally, when the sun reached its highest point in the sky, Amarachi stood. Her decision was made. She wrapped Miri carefully in her best cloth, the one she had been saving for the child she thought she would never have. She waited until nightfall, when the village had exhausted itself with searching and had finally fallen into restless sleep. Then, moving like a ghost through the darkness, Amarachi made her way to the dry riverbed. The walk felt eternal. Each step was agony. Miri sensed something and began to whimper, clutching Amarachi's wrapper with tiny fingers that seemed to beg, "Don't let me go." "I'm sorry," Amarachi whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry, my love. I'm so sorry." When she reached the riverbed, she stood at the edge of the cracked earth and looked down. The moon was full, casting silver light across the desolate landscape. The silence was absolute. Amarachi took a deep breath and called out, her voice shaking. "I know you can hear me. I know you're waiting. I've come to return your child." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air began to shimmer. Water appeared from nowhere, rising from the dry earth like a resurrection. It swirled and gathered, forming a shape that became more solid with each passing second. And there she stood, the River Queen, even more magnificent than in her vision. She was tall and regal, her presence so powerful that Amarachi felt her knees buckle. But it was the expression on the River Queen's face that undid her completely. It was the face of a mother who had been searching desperately for her lost child, the same expression Amarachi wore every time she prayed for a baby of her own. They were the same, Amarachi realized, both mothers, both loving, both suffering. "Please," Amarachi said, her voice barely a whisper, "please forgive me. I didn't steal her to hurt you. I was so empty, so alone, and when I found her, I felt whole for the first time in so long." The River Queen's eyes, deep as the ocean itself, softened slightly. "I know your pain," she said, her voice like water flowing over smooth stones. "Every mother knows that pain. But she is mine, as surely as the river flows to the sea." "I know," Amarachi sobbed. "I know she is, and I hate myself for taking her from you. But I love her. I love her so much it's killing me." "Love that takes is not love at all," the River Queen said gently. "True love gives, even when giving breaks your heart." Amarachi looked down at Miri one last time. The baby gazed up at her, still smiling, still trusting, still believing in the woman who had cared for her. "Be happy, my precious one," Amarachi whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. "Be safe, be loved, and forgive me for letting you go." With trembling hands, she held the baby out toward the River Queen. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than enduring Chinedu's rejection. Harder than watching Nkiru's children grow while her own womb stayed empty. Harder than anything she had ever imagined.
The River Queen took her child, and the moment Mmiri was in her mother's arms, the baby's form began to change. She grew slightly larger, her tail became more defined, and a soft glow emanated from her skin. She was transforming back into what she truly was, a child of the river, not of the land. But before she changed completely, Mmiri looked back at Amarachi one last time, and in that look, Amarachi saw recognition, love, gratitude. The River Queen noticed. She studied Amarachi for a long moment, then spoke. "You cared for my daughter when she was vulnerable. You loved her when you had every reason to think only of yourself. You fed her, protected her, gave her warmth." "It was nothing," Amarachi said, tears streaming down her face. "She gave me more than I could ever give her." "No, it was everything," the River Queen replied, "and the river never forgets kindness." She paused, her gaze seeming to see straight into Amarachi's soul. "Your womb has been closed, but I open it now. You will bear children, and they will be strong and healthy and filled with the spirit of one who knows sacrifice." Before Amarachi could respond, the River Queen and Mmiri began to fade, becoming water once more. But just before they disappeared completely, Mmiri's small hand reached out, and Amarachi felt the lightest touch on her cheek, like a goodbye kiss from a daughter to a mother. Then they were gone. The moment they vanished, Amarachi heard a sound she thought she would never hear again, the sound of rushing water. The river was flowing, returning to life, filling its bed with crystal clear water that sparkled under the moonlight. Amarachi fell to her knees, her body shaking with sobs so deep they seemed to come from the very core of her being. She had done the right thing, she knew that, but knowing didn't make the pain any less. She cried until she had no tears left, until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, until the first villagers came running, their shouts of joy echoing across the land as they discovered the river had returned. 3 months later, Amarachi stood in Mama Mwanyi's hut, her hands trembling as the old seer examined her. The village had recovered. The children who had fallen into deep sleep had awakened the morning after the river returned. The crops had begun to grow again. Life had resumed its normal rhythm. But Amarachi had noticed changes in her own body, changes she was afraid to believe in. Mama Mwanyi looked up, her cloudy eyes somehow seeing everything. A slow smile spread across her wrinkled face. "You are with child," she said simply. "No, not just one child, 2, twins, a boy and a girl." Amarachi's legs gave out. She sat down hard, her hand flying to her stomach.
Are you certain?" "As certain as the river flows, my daughter. The water has blessed you. You gave back what was not yours, and in return, you have been given what truly belongs to you." Amarachi couldn't speak. She could only sit there, tears of joy streaming across her face, her hands pressed against her belly, where 2 precious lives were growing. That evening, when she told Chinedu, he wept. He fell to his knees before her and begged her forgiveness for how he had treated her. "I was a fool," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I blamed you for what only the gods could control. Can you ever forgive me?" Amarachi looked at him, at this man who had caused her so much pain. She thought about bitterness, about revenge, about holding on to hurt. Then she thought about Mmiri, about the River Queen, about the lesson she had learned, that love means letting go. "I forgive you," she said quietly. 9 months later, the birth was long and difficult, but when Amarachi finally heard the cries of her babies, she knew every moment of pain had been worth it. A boy and a girl, just as Mama Mwanyi had predicted. both healthy, both perfect, both hers. As she held them for the first time, one in each arm, she thought of another baby she had held. A baby with a silvery tail and ancient eyes. A baby who had taught her the true meaning of love. 3 days after the birth, when she was strong enough to walk, Amarachi went to the river. She stood at the bank, her twin sleeping peacefully in a wrapper tied across her back. The water was clear and beautiful, flowing gently, singing its eternal song. "Thank you," Amarachi whispered. "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the blessing. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the greatest love is knowing to let go." The water seemed to shimmer in response, and for just a moment, Amarachi thought she saw a familiar shape beneath the surface. A baby mermaid, playing in the currents, safe and happy in her mother's kingdom. Amarachi smiled through her tears and placed her hand on the water. It was warm, like a mother's touch. "Be well, my sweet Miri, and know that somewhere on the land, a woman will always remember you, will always love you, will always be grateful that you taught her what it means to truly be a mother." The river sparkled in the sunlight, and somewhere in its depths, a mother and daughter swam together, whole and complete. And on the river bank, another mother stood with her own children, equally whole, equally complete, understanding finally that some blessings come disguised as goodbyes, and that the river never forgets those who act with a pure heart.